Welcome back to another episode of Time Out with the Sports Doctor podcast. I'd first like to take a moment to say Happy Memorial Day to each and every one of you, and I would like to pay tribute to the men and women and military personnel who have given their lives so that we may have the freedoms that we're able to enjoy today. I'd also like a moment to reflect over the lives that have been lost, especially the children's lives that were lost over this last week to gun violence. And at times like these, it brings along a sense of appreciation as a father to be able to wake up every morning and see my children. At times, that's something that we take for granted, being able to have loved ones and being able to see them. And, in life, and many times we make so many plans, but that's our plans and not necessarily God's plans. So with the loss of life over the last week, I've really had time to reflect and appreciate what we take for granted so often. So, if you have loved ones that you have not been in contact with, or just day when you're in contact with your family, do not take it for granted that they will be here tomorrow. So tell them you love them and appreciate them while they're here with you. Over the last week as well, I've celebrated my 13th wedding anniversary, and I'm very excited. We have a lot going on in our family. My wife was on the show a few weeks back. As you know, she's now 6 months into running her own pediatric dental practice. Children all had successful school years, so a lot to be thankful for. This week's going to be a little different episode from the norm. You've gotten used to me having generally guests on the show and to interview them, as well as there have been some solo episodes where I share on different topics or maybe give a story about myself. But over the last 3 months, I've had the opportunity to be on 6 different podcast shows, all in different formats. So I was able to participate in a live recording on the segment Live. I've also been on a live episode with Three Friends Talk that was live streamed, as well as on several other podcasts that are kind of the more traditional pre-recorded episodes. But the more that I visit other podcasts and the more that I tell my story and share my story with others, I realize that when I sit behind the microphone and just talk, it has a different feel from when I'm being interviewed by someone. So today I want to share an episode that I had with Dr. Barry Pierre on the Lunch and Learn YouTube channel about a month ago, which I felt was one of the better interviews that really showed who I am as a man, as a husband, as a father, as a physician, as a mentor in the community. So I want to share this episode with you. And as always, I'm open to your feedback. I appreciate when you guys communicate with me to let me know what you like and what you dislike. As well as, if you like it, please leave a review, leave a 5-star rating, because that 5-star rating helps this show grow and it helps more people to be able to get access to the show. We are closing out the first year of having this podcast. Time Out with the Sports Doctor was launched on 6/20/2021. And now as we enter into June, we are coming up on our anniversary. So I think over the next couple of weeks, I'll do some reflecting over what this podcast has meant for me in the first year, what I've learned, lessons learned, as well as some of the episodes that I've really enjoyed. And also that you've shown that you really enjoyed by, the amount of downloads that each episode has had. So without further ado, we'll get into this episode. And as always, be blessed.
This podcast is brought to you by Zero Gravity Skin, a prolific leader in the aesthetic devices market, delivering anti-aging, complexion clearing, hair growth, and pain management solutions across the globe. Featuring the Perfectio X, a 2-in-1 device which treats both pain and signs of aging and is actively working to reverse cell damage accumulated over time. Also, the Relaxio, which provides damaged cells with the vital energy necessary to quickly renew and recover in the most optimal way. For more information, please visit zerogravityskin.com and use code Dr. Derek 30 to receive 30% off your purchase. Again, that's zerogravityskin.com, promo code Dr. Derek 30.
I have a special discussion, special guest with you, Dr. Derek Burgess, who is better known as a sports doctor. We're going to talk about a lot of things. First of all, obviously, you know, when I talk to my physicians, especially my physicians who also happen to be podcasters, I want to get in all of their business. I want to talk about what they were before they were the doctor, and then how they got to this point here, and kind of what makes them tick and how's their daily day. So again, Dr. Burgess, first of all, thank you for taking the time out. I know how crazy busy you are. First of all, look, ladies and gentlemen, this is a surgeon, right? You already know how difficult it is to get surgeons on the podcast, right? So I appreciate you taking the time out for joining today.
Hey, man, I'm glad to be here. I'm tired from just hearing you talk about 3 different shows and all this different stuff. So, man, hats off to you.
No,
you're doing a great job, man.
No, I appreciate it. It's just one of those things where I think, especially in this day and age, as a physician, you know, it's almost, I hate to say it, but it's almost not enough to just be a physician. Like, we have to kind of continue to grow. If you caught last couple weeks episode, we talked about branding. So I think it was just almost innate in us. And when we think about, especially when we were a resident, when we were tasked to do so many different things, a lot of times it was with a singular focus. And a lot of times when we get out and we become an attending, that single focus kind of gets minimized. Like, I remember when I first started, like, my office manager and my MA had to kind of sit me down and say, hey, you know, Dr. Pierre, we can kind of do some of those things you keep doing, because I was so used to doing everything. So no, I definitely understand that process of doing a lot of things, for sure.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, it's time, and I'm going to quote Dr. Nee Darko, it's time for us all to be docs outside the box, right? But it's a process that we have to go through to deprogram ourselves. Like you mentioned, you want to send every email, you want to write up every chart, you want to call every patient, and they're like, no, we have people to do that, because now your time in your hospital or whoever's money is better spent with you doing what only a doctor can do. But in so many situations, that's not what's going on. And I think that's leading to burnout. And, you know, a lot of physicians want to leave the practice of medicine.
Very good. Very good. Well, we definitely got to touch on that, especially the burnout aspect, for sure. Before especially when I get my docs on here, right, I kind of, because my Lunch Learn community, they love to kind of see our journey, right? Because for a lot of them, especially for patients and, you know, prospective people who are just interested in health, you know, they typically see just the end product, right? So they see the sports doctor, right? But they don't see Derek Burgess. They don't see what kind of led us to the point where we got to the point where we say, yeah, I'm Dr. Burgess, right? Like, what was Dr. Burgess like before he became a doctor? What kind of motivated you to kind of go on this path of medicine?
Sure. So I guess you want me to show all my lumps, bumps, and bruises, huh? So yeah, I think the backstory is always important, because I talk about that on my show a lot, that once you see a person who is at the level of success that you meet them at, you assume that they've been there, or that they just automatically elevated to that level and didn't go through the struggles or didn't have failures in their life. So I'm a first generation medical student first. My father worked in a factory. My mother was an educator, a middle school educator. So education was always pushed in my home. And even though my father didn't have a graduate level or college degree, he was probably the hardest person on me. So going to college was never really discussed in my house. I knew I was going to college. And sometime during high school, I said, hey, I want to be a physician. I had an injury in high school that led me to meet an orthopedic surgeon. And I expressed interest in medicine. And he said, hey, you should come hang out with me sometime. So starting in high school, I got exposure to orthopedics, and I kept coming back. And I said, hey, I want to be an orthopedic surgeon, because I felt that it married sports, I was an athlete, and medicine. Now, truly, is that true? Not really, but in sports medicine, which is what I chose, but it was enough to give me a drive to pursue it. Now, I got to medical school. I thought I knew how to study. I didn't know how to study. I struggled a lot in medical school. You know, I got over the step 1 hump, but, you know, if the line is here, I barely jumped that line, which is a struggle to get into orthopedics. So I didn't match the first time. So after finishing med school, doing all this, I was met with a major obstacle of, hey, do I pursue orthopedics or do I choose another route? So I decided to continue to pursue orthopedics. Going through a surgery internship and trying to interview for orthopedics is not the easiest thing in the world. So it took a lot of commitment, a lot of dedication, a lot of sacrifice. And I think the word sacrifice is one of the appreciated words about medicine, the sacrifice and the delayed gratification that it takes to actually get here. And then, I struggled with standardized tests. And standardized tests don't end after the ACT or SAT or after the MCAT.
No, they do not, unfortunately.
They keep coming. They come every year during your training. They come every year after your training for certification. So that's another thing that it took me just a lot of effort and a lot of continued grinding to perfect myself to get over that hump as well. But now I'm here. And a lot of people told me, you don't want to do medicine because you'll be in school the rest of your life. And now every day I hear someone say, wow, you look like you're not even old enough to be a doctor. So, that's just me in a nutshell. I'm a husband. I'm a father of 3 and an orthopedic surgeon. I'm a podcaster. I have a lot that is on my hands, but I've never had as much fun as I'm currently having in my life.
What I love about really the setup, right? Because I think a lot of people, especially at least the Lunchland community members kind of know, they've kind of heard my failures. They've heard the step 2 failure. They heard, failing. I'm in internal medicine. So they heard me failing my first rotation, which was internal medicine. So they've seen the bumps. And I think, and you said it best, a lot of times because they see that end product, they just assume that we've just been rosy and been amazing our whole time frame, and not realizing that, yes, it was ups, this was downs, but there was something in us, something innate in us that said, you know what, I'm going to keep on going despite the troubles, despite the tribulations, despite the setbacks, despite, probably running into people saying yeah, you sure you want to do this? Right. And that especially you never hear, especially when you're in high school. Right. Because I think I started, I think I was in elementary school. But when you say I want to be a doctor, sometimes you don't even really think about the plan B, because once you kind of make your mind up and say, this is where I want to go, all of the other options don't really make sense to you. You're so passion driven to go in that direction of medicine, to become the doctor, become the person you want to be, that become what do you want? Plan B? I don't even know what that means. Right. Yeah. So I love just hearing your story, because again, it just resonates with me so much. Obviously, again, Lunchland community, I'm a father of 3, I'm a podcaster, a husband, all these things there that, kind of help mirror just kind of seeing, it's almost seeing a level of excellence, from across the room, and seeing that yep, look at these people who have some of the same struggles, have some of the same issues that they have to deal with, but they still got to take care of their patients, and they still got to do well for themselves, and also still have time to, for some reason, do a podcast. It's just love seeing that drive. And again, obviously, shout out to Dr. Nee Darko, who kind of mentioned earlier, because he's been a big mentor of mine. Big reason why I even started a podcast in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting, especially as you go through, right? And, you meet that one mentor that says, you know what, come join me. Now, was that just by, obviously you had the injury, but was it that you were kind of interested in medicine, and then it was kind of married into that orthopedics, and then you're oh, okay, I could see myself doing that. And what were, I guess, the odds of running into that one mentor? Because I know when I talk to a lot, especially my pre-meds, that's always been their big issue, right? That they don't have anyone to either look up to, or anyone who's ready to kind of take them under their wings.
Yeah, so I think mentorship is key. So I'm not sitting here as an orthopedic surgeon without mentors. Now, the first mentor that I had in medicine was actually my family practice physician, who worked right alongside the orthopedic surgeon. Now, if the orthopedic surgeon doesn't know my family medicine physician, does he offer me the opportunity to come in? Maybe, or maybe not. Probably not. That's the relationship capital piece. So being able to get out and network is powerful. And if I had anything to do over again, I would ask more people for help. I would reach out to people and actually talk to them. I was very shy about approaching people. What if they think I'm, crazy, or what if they don't want to help me? The answer is always no until you ask. And if you ask, it can still be no, but it could be yes. But if you don't ask, it's always going to be no. So I've had mentors on all different levels. When I first got to medical school, I was very fortunate enough to be linked up with Dr. Richard Grant, who was one of the first program directors and one of the leaders in the orthopedic field. I was in his private practice. I was also, his partner was Dr. Bunny Simpson, who now Dr. Bunny Simpson Mason, who has gone on to create Nth Dimension. So, God led me into that path even before the program was started. But without pivotal people like that in my corner, when the times get tough and your application comes up and the paper doesn't look right, but you have that letter of recommendation and they say, oh yeah, I know Richard Grant, I know Dr. Mason. Sure. Yeah. If they say that, then we're going to give him a chance. So it takes things like that really to have your back. Somebody has to be pushing behind the scenes many times for you to get through these doors.
And you said something, but first of all, shout out to Dr. Bunny Simpson, because for lunch learning community, especially if you're watching the show on YouTube, I lit up because that's been a name that I've known of for now. Oh my God, it's probably been like a decade now. Not for what she's done in the career, right, of orthopedic surgery, right, but what she's done to make sure that people follow behind her. Right. Absolutely. And that's always been a thing. Like when I talk to my pre-meds, I said, there's one thing for me, right? Barry Pierre, to get through the door, be able to, have these accomplishments. But if I get through the door and I don't hold that door open so someone can follow along, what great of a job am I doing? And not only is, Bonnie, holding that door open, she's kicked it open and put a stone in front of it that you can't even move it. So yeah, definitely shout out to her for sure.
Yeah, and built a whole nother building on the side of the door,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And something you mentioned too, right? Which I love, right? They said, if I would have known better, right, I would have asked for more help. How often do we kind of go through our journey, our path to become who we are, right? And realize and think that all right, I got to do this on my own. I gotta just put my head down in the sand and go, right? And no one's going to be able to help me. No one wants to help me because we just assume that everyone else followed that same path, head down in the sand and kept it moving.
Oh yeah. We think that, especially if you don't get into medical school the first time, it's almost like the world is ending. And then you get to medical school and you look around and the average age of an entering first year medical student is 25, 26. So most people are taking time off to either work, travel the world, teach, whatever, go to post-bac program. So don't get in the first time. It's not the end of the world. If you don't pass the board exam or don't get the MCAT or SAT score that you want, it's not the end of the world. You might have to work harder in other areas. You might have to do research. You might have to do a little more shadowing. But it's still not the end of the world. There's multiple ways, many different ways to get in. But the main thing, you have to be persistent. And the first time you hear no, if you turn around and walk away, that's what they want many times. People will tell you no quickly because they don't even want to do the work that yes requires. So no is a reflex for many different situations, from applying to at work. The word no just comes out so easy, but I learned to not listen to that.
So what's it like, right? A day in your life right now, right? The sports doctor, orthopedic surgeon, sports medicine, kind of, kind of lean, right? What's a day in your life like? If I'm just wondering, I wonder what Dr. Burgess does on a regular day.
Yeah, I was actually just thinking about that this morning. I was like, I need to make a reel about this because I'm a orthopedic surgeon, sports medicine specialist. So on any given day or in any given week, I might treat patients in 4 or 5 different areas, from the operating room to the office setting, to the hospital setting, to the ER setting, to an injury clinic at a school. Tomorrow, I'll be going out to do pre-participation sports physicals. This weekend, I'll be covering a football event. So I don't practice medicine only in a hospital or only in the office. It's all over. And I think that's one thing that's very exciting about the field of sports medicine, very exciting about the field of orthopedics, is that every day is something different. Between getting ready for surgery, to operating on somebody, to seeing somebody in recovery, to seeing them through rehab, to seeing them on the actual field returning to their sport. So it's very gratifying to see someone go through that whole process and get back to doing what they love.
And honestly, that's where I like, especially from an orthopedic surgeon standpoint, because I think the general public has this idea that if you're orthopedic surgeon, you know, you're in the OR and like that's all you do is OR stuff. And I don't know if they realize like how much of your work actually happens outside of the operating room. I talk to my colleagues all the time, the orthopedic guys, right? That like, even though like there's these memes and these videos that make it seem like y'all not like, you know, the smartest of the specialties, right? But like we all know that ain't true. But like it's amazing how much stuff y'all do and really how much you know, your work, right, is encompassed in everyday life.
Absolutely. I mean, you can, in many instances, you can teach a scrub tech or a first assist to do the surgical procedure. It's knowing who needs that surgical procedure, knowing how to correctly diagnose somebody clinically is what separates the good from the great in orthopedics. Because if you do a great surgery for the wrong indication, you're still not going to get a good result.
Oh, I love it. I love it. See, and again, that's again, especially because again, as a special learning community member, you know, yes, surgeons, they do what they do, but it takes so much of a mental before they actually put their hands on you, right? Like the work happens up here first, right? Absolutely. When it comes to healing. Right. Yeah. It's not like, oh, you got a broken bone. Like I said, and like, no, it's like, what do I need to do? What do I need to process? What is going to be the outlook for the patient in front of me? Because you and my patients, I think a lot of my patients are sometimes surprised how often the surgeons be like, no, you don't probably need surgery for this. No, just rehab for this. But, like, I think sometimes they're like shocked, like, you mean I don't need surgery?
Mm-hmm. And you'll be surprised how many patients come in with the only thing they want is surgery. And I'm like, why are you so eager to get put to sleep, number one, to go under anesthesia, and then to have a major surgical procedure? You're scaring me with your eagerness, you know?
So let's move on, right? Because because obviously this is the part I'm really excited about, right? So it's like you just kind of, you were just ran your day-to-day, right? Which is crazy busy enough, which is accomplished enough so that people can say, you know what? Dr. Burgess is doing this thing, right? Husband, father, and look at where he's working. Like, he's good, right? But you say, you know what? That's not enough, right? And I love the docs who be like, you know what? That's cool, but I need to do more, right? So talk about kind of stepping out, right, outside of, you know, the normal, right, atmosphere that we may see our typical physician, and saying, you know what, I need to get online. I need to get on a podcast. I need to do more. Like, what was that mental process like? What kind of led you to this point here? And really, what are some of your goals coming out of it?
Sure. So one thing is, I represent, as an African-American male, I represent less than 2% of orthopedic surgeons, probably somewhere closer to 1.6 to 1.7% of orthopedic surgeons. So I feel that the fact that I'm sitting here as an orthopedic surgeon, it is my responsibility I'm through the door. I need to bring somebody with me. Now I have 5 to 10 minutes when I'm sitting down with a patient, maybe 15 minutes to treat the patient, to come up with a plan. And then I always like to try to see where they are, especially if I'm dealing with a young athlete or a high school student, to see what are your plans for life. But very small time to do that.
Okay.
So this podcast gives me the ability to have Dr. Pierre on to talk about mentoring, or have someone else on, another doctor, to talk about their career. So now when I meet someone, I say, hey, go to episode 30. If you want to be an anesthesiologist, you need to hear from Dr. Stephen Bradley, you know, and you need to know that just because you mess up or just because you're not perfect, it can still be done. Because if I can be an orthopedic surgeon with the struggles that I've had, anybody can do it. And I want people to truly believe that. So that's one main thing on my platform, is that I want people to, you know, I try to work on mindset. I try to work on to help people grow their assets, and to give practical tips to help people achieve whatever level of success that they want. And that's different for everybody. Success is different for everybody, but everybody has the ability to achieve something, but many times you don't believe it. And like Les Brown would say, I'm here to show you what's possible.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So out of all of the options you could have had, right? You could have just did, you know, blogging, right? You could have just did videos, right? It could have been on like what was it about podcasting that said, you know what, like I like this avenue over here? What was it like about it? And again, like, because obviously I have my selfish reasons why I feel like I just kind of ended up in podcasting. But I always like to hear my fellow podcasters what kind of said, you know what, I think podcast is the medium for me.
Yeah. So number one, blogging. I don't like writing, and I thought that this would be an efficient way. One thing is that when the start of the pandemic, 2020, I hosted a couple of 2 different sessions about COVID-19. And I did that out of necessity because I kept looking around. I'm like, why are we not speaking out? Why are we begging? Why are we waiting on the state to tell us what we need to do when we're healthcare providers and we know what we needed to do? And then you're knocking on certain doors. Hey, can we talk about this? No, we can't talk about that. Or, can we get out something to talk about protecting yourself, masking? No, not really to really talk about that. So I was like, okay, I have a voice. Let me do it myself. And I hosted two different events. And from that, I said, okay, I can do this because I already had thought about being a podcaster. And then I mentioned Dr. Nii Darko before. I went on the Leverage and Growth Accelerator Conference, and he was on day 1 of that course. And he talked about being a podcaster and being a doc outside the box. And for the first time I saw myself, I was like, he's a surgeon. In his show, he's talking like a regular person. And he's been doing this for 5 or 6 years. Let me reach out to him. So I reached out to him. I took his course, and 10 weeks later, I launched my podcast, which is now on Father's Day of last year. So today is 10 months old. So I found my voice, and I found the ability to produce and make this product come about by, seeing someone else. So mentorship once again.
First of all, again, obviously shout out to our friend of the show, Dr. Nii Darko, man, because it is one of those things, especially in the median of podcasting, right? Mm-hmm. And I talked about it, especially when I started a journey. Like, what can I do to kind of talk to people outside of my clinic, right? Like, that was my mindset. Like, yeah, I got you in my clinic. I could talk a good game in my clinic. I could educate you, do what I need to do, but I can't reach so-and-so down the street, right? I can't reach so-and-so in the next block, right? In the next county, in the next state, right? In the next country. I couldn't reach them. And I said, what is going to be the best way to do it? And like, again, I just kind of lucked up. And someone stopped me and said, hey, you know what? I like what you're doing. Because at the time I was doing videos, but could you put it in audio format? And obviously, like, the rest is history. And again, shout out to Dr. Nii Darko, because like, listen to his podcast again, just kind of, and I just heard, I was like, oh, you know what? Like, this guy, again, I told myself, because again, as a physician, we kind of do this where like sometimes we need to see a barrier broken to realize that we can kind of go in that direction. So once I saw like, all right, I know this guy's got to be crazy busy, right? Like, and if he has the time to do a podcast, I almost have no excuse to do it. And that's what kind of drove, me head on. And you talked about kind of the message. The message is so important because now someone could be in the comfort of their home. Someone could be driving to and from work. They got 30 minutes to kill. And they say, oh, let me just listen to this podcast right here. And then now they've able to kind of digest the message and be able to kind of act upon it. Right. So that's why I absolutely love just the medium podcasting, right, of podcasting, because I think it just kind of hit home on all parts, especially as a busy physician, where a lot of times we need to be able to say what we need to say and go. And you could like listen to this later. You can listen to this next week. You can listen to it whenever and still get the message that I was dropping. Right. I agree 100%. So and it travels well. Like talk about the name. So I actually didn't. What is the name of your podcast? So just so people can kind of get an idea of like where to get to, but like, what is the name of the podcast? Just so people know. Absolutely. So it's Time Out with the Sports Doctor podcast. It can be found on all podcasts are available, from Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, on Audible. Also, my website, I have a Podpage website. It's Dr. Derek, the Sports Doctor. .com, and you can go to that website. It has all the episodes on the website. You can also give me feedback. You can rate and review the podcast.
And if you are interested in coming on, you can contact me through that website, either by voicemail or you can write me like an email. So that's the best spot to get all the content that I have is on the website.
And then kind of a part 2 follow up. Now that you got the podcast, right? What in 3 years and 5 years, what does it look like, right? Like, what does it look like for Dr. Burgess, with his podcast? Like, where do you see yourself kind of going with this platform, especially in the discussion of mentorship and, mindset and everything else?
Sure. So one thing I did motivational speaking prior to the pandemic starting, and then it stopped completely afterwards. So I want to get back into doing more motivational speaking to high school groups. I go out and speak to our local high school health science classes, but also I want to get more into speaking to larger corporations and universities. I also want to develop products to help people that are struggling with some of the things that I mentioned before, from standardized test taking to just mindset. Imposter syndrome is something that we struggle with as physicians. I struggle with particularly, but it's many times you can achieve great success in one arena and look to the next arena and just completely doubt yourself. So that mindset piece is very important.
You said a word right there.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Because I think a lot of times people may think, especially like Dr. Burgess, he's accomplished, man. Look what his day job looks like. Like, look at all the stuff he's doing. So they assume that you can't even have imposter syndrome, or if you did, that it should go away. Right. So I love the fact that you said, I could be good in this sliver here, but I got a whole different sliver over here that I'm kind of like.
Absolutely. And sometimes you have to have other people coaching, surrounding yourself in a community like this, where people you can say, man, you can do that. Let me just show you how to do it, or contact this person, do this, do that. And taking a course or going on a weekend retreat with a couple of other people doing what you want to do can launch your career light years ahead of where you would be trying to do it by yourself. So one thing I've learned through podcasting is the power of networking. For a period in my life, I was struggling with some things and I kind of made myself an island, so to speak. But, it gives you a chance to actually talk to people again and not just text or email, but to have real conversations. And from every conversation that I have on the podcast, I learn something from each and every interview. And it empowers me. And hopefully it empowers my audience. I know it empowers my children as well.
Oh, that's a big thing, especially, again, shameless plug, y'all. I was on the podcast, right? So make sure you check out my episode and learn some stuff as well, too. Because, and you say you're dropping a lot of gems tonight, because I think a lot of times people, especially when you're on this side, I guess, doing the interviewing, doing the discussion, sometimes, especially Lunch and Learn community, I say this all the time, like I be learning just as much from my guests, right, as the wisdom that they're kind of bestowing upon y'all guys, right? So don't think that this is always like my guest is, dropping gems on y'all and y'all the only ones taking it. Like I be sitting here like, yep, he's right. Yep. Yeah, you're right. Yep. Like, because it hits home, especially when you see like, okay, yep, yeah, he's like, I definitely went through that same exact struggle, right? I definitely had those same issues. I definitely had those same concerns. And now that I know I'm not alone, right, in that process, right now, like I can process it differently, right? When you think you're alone, when you think you're kind of secluded, sometimes you don't even know how to process it, because you think like, no one else has solved this problem. So like, what am I going to do with it? Right. But then being able to see someone, right, who has kind of been through kind of similar situations and then make it on the other side is always very an uplifting moment.
Yeah. So that was another reason why I wanted to go into podcasting, because as a first generation physician, first generation professional, first generation person trying to learn investing and different things of that nature, it kind of made me a little mad to find out at the age of 38 and 39, some of these life lessons that probably many people learn when they're in 10 or 11 years old, about investment and saving and the difference between passive and active investment.
We about to have a whole nother conversation.
So we have to start having these conversations, and we need our children to hear these conversations, and we to discuss these conversations amongst each other, because we are light years behind when it comes to wealth in our country. And we can work all we want to, and we can save all we want to, but until we learn how to invest, we're going to remain behind. So we have to learn how to pool our resources together. We have to learn how to make smart investments so that we can close the wealth gap in our country.
You know, I don't even want to go because we could probably talk all night. But it's so funny because like I always find myself like playing catch up, right? And being just like you, being frustrated, like, oh man, if I just know during residency to throw my money,
make a minimum loan, right? Make a minimum loan payment, right?
Yeah, just simple, like, oh my hospital was matching. Why didn't I put money just so they can, like, just simple things that like now seem like a no-brainer. So of course I'm talking to my kids are like 9 and 6, right? And I'm showing them like, hey y'all, these are your brokerage account. You just invested in Apple this week. And they don't, I know they don't understand it, but by the time they get to my age, they're like, boy, daddy was on point, right? And it is sometimes the lack of information. Right. Because it's not as if we wouldn't have likely acted upon it if we knew it 10, 15, 20 years ago. We just had no clue.
No clue.
Right? So it's almost like I don't want to say a burden. Right. But when you're the first, right, because I'm the first as well, too, kind of for my first position. First is like, so when you're kind of the first, really breaking down kind of generational barriers in terms of career, in terms of finance, where you're the first and having to learn, right? It sometimes can get frustrating because you just wish, like, man, if I'd have just known, like if I would have just bought Apple, right? If I would have just bought Nike when I was buying all those Nikes, like where I probably wouldn't be being the doctor now. Like just some crazy stuff you'd be thinking about.
Yeah, unfortunately, many situations, you don't learn the rules to the game until you're actually playing the game. So, and that's unfair, but that's life, you know? So we got to change that.
So before we let you go, where can people find you? Where can people follow you? You kind of mentioned the speaking aspect as well too. So where can if they want to get a good speaker, like where can all these things? Where can people like follow Dr. Burgess?
Sure. So as I mentioned, the website, Dr. Derek, thesportsdoctor.com is kind of my landing site, but also Instagram, Dr. Derek, the Sports Doctor, or on Facebook, same name, Dr. Derek, the Sports Doctor. So, and then of course, my podcast, Time Out with the Sports Doctor, can be found on all platforms from Apple to Spotify to Google to Amazon, Audible. So please reach out and connect with me.
And remember, let's learn community. Again, if you're driving, working, whatever you're doing, all of these links that he mentioned will be in the show notes as well. Please make sure you follow up with Dr. Burgess. Please subscribe to the podcast. Please leave him a 5-star review. Please leave him a comment saying, "Yep, this is just what I need." First of all, I want to say thank you, right, for not believing the lie that there's enough podcasts, that there's enough people doing blank. So I'm not going to do that. So I appreciate you getting over because that's sometimes a mental hump for a lot of, especially like my other colleagues, right? And that I'd say, hey, you should do this. Like they always think, oh, there's already enough people doing it, right? So thank you for not believing the lie, right? That enough people are doing it and then stepping out on your own and, with great success for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for continuing to support this podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, then please leave a 5-star review. And if you haven't done so, subscribe so you continue to get the updated episodes. Until later, peace.